Hello and good afternoon. This is Chuck Hardwick Jr., and I'm on a Zoom call with my dad, Chuck Hardwick Sr., and we are in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So we thought it would be fun to record a call and learn a little bit more about Chuck Hardwick Sr. So, Dad, how have things changed for you in terms of the coronavirus? And tell us about how things have changed for you in terms of your personal life.
Well, Chuck, good to see you. I'm talking to you from our home in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, and you're at your home in San Diego. This virus has been something that none of us ever expected, that's for sure. It's been profound. But there have been some good aspects of it for me personally. I was pleased that Sheila and Austin drove down from Massachusetts 2 weeks ago and will be here until everything is all cleared because his school closed. And that was really good. It's given me time for introspection about my own life and what's going on in the world. And I don't always like everything I think about when I do that. It's brought a lot of people together, I think. You and I certainly have grown closer over the last few weeks, and that's a very big plus. And I think so is most of the rest of the family. The bad side of that is I'm sure caused some people to grow apart, especially the idea of separation and keeping your distance. And so it's both, it's both some good aspects and some bad aspects. I think one of the bad aspects, at least for me, has been one of fear. Haven't been afraid of anything for a long time, and this is fearful. It's fearful for in a lot of different ways about my health, about all my loved ones' health. It's fearful financially. I've been heavily invested in the stock market and felt very comfortable about that. And it's not worth as much as it used to be. And the economy is a real concern. And then there are long-term things that are there that we aren't really sure about. It's very worrisome. Will nations come together? Some are. But will this experience drive more nations apart? This morning in the Wall Street Journal, Henry Kissinger had an essay saying that the world used to be divided with nation states with walls built around them. And if we move in that direction, the long-term outcome of that's likely to be very unfavorable because whether we like it or not, our economies are interconnected, our households are often interconnected, and that's a real problem. And the other thing is exacerbated for both in this country and worldwide is the split between the haves and the have-nots. I was very distressed to read accounts of all the children now who can't study from home because they have no internet or they don't have computers, they don't have iPads. Now, Austin is on there every day, he's on there too much, and it's not always a learning experience, but it's very distressful to me to think how many millions of young people are not being prepared for the lives that they're going to have in this country as well as other countries for the next how many years. So that's a bad side of this, but at least it's drawn awareness about these issues in a way we never had before.
Let me jump in and make a comment on that. I was watching something on television about infrastructure and how the next big stimulus for the economy could be trillions of dollars for infrastructure. And someone made the comment, we should have broadband for everyone. Broadband, we should make that a priority. What do you think about that? Spend $1 trillion, get everyone on high-speed internet, whatever.
No, I think it's as important as roads and bridges and other hard things. I think in this day and age, to be digitally deprived, DD, is a real heartache. And then for trends, one thing that this has driven home to me is I think the concept of national health insurance has advanced tremendously. In fact, we have it now. Trump himself said, well, anyone who is sick of the coronavirus, the government will pay for it. So that's like national health care to me. And I think that time, it's a matter of working out the details. I think the time for that has come. I think that in the trend as a result of this, we're going to be even more digital, as you're talking about the need for the internet. I think that we're going to have a real push for redistribution of income. I don't think it's going to be just an idea by the far, far left. I think that the right, I consider myself reasonable conservative, has got to face that. And that means with this, I was worried about a $21 trillion deficit and when will the debt come due? We're going to end up with a $30 trillion deficit, which is incomprehensible. And that means some huge fundamental changes in our government. I see down the road a wealth tax, because you can only tax so much in income, but an awful lot of wealth is not in income. It's in real estate and stocks and bonds and artwork and patents protection, all kinds of other things. So the next decade is going to see just tremendous changes in this country that will be brought about by this pandemic. In the same way that the Great Depression brought us things that we take for granted now, like Social Security and unemployment insurance and a role for the government. And you may remember FDR had a WPA, I think it was called the Welfare Public Works Program or whatever, putting people to work, doing useful projects. That's what Trump essentially said, that we're going to have an infrastructure bill. And it wasn't just for the infrastructure, it's for jobs. So this whole political world is turned upside down. And I hope some good comes out of that. It certainly isn't the world that I was raised in as a kid, I can tell you that.
Well, yeah, let's shift gears a little bit. And that's a really interesting analysis, but let's talk a little bit more about the differences and tell us a little bit about what it was like. I know you were born in Somerset, Kentucky. What was it like? What was one of your earliest childhood memories over there in Somerset, Kentucky?
Well, I was born at home. We didn't have a hospital in Somerset at the time. In fact, one of my earliest memories, I just happened to have a picture. We don't have a lot of pictures from that time, but we weren't that prosperous and cameras weren't as common as they are now. Certainly nothing like digital. But anyway, I remember my mother taking me downtown. I remember holding her hand, walking downtown to have my picture taken when I was 4 years old. And for people who love old pictures, this was me when I was 4 in Somerset, Kentucky. In retrospect, I think back on Somerset, all the things then that we took for granted are things today people would pay and do pay a tremendous amount of money for. What am I talking about? I'm talking about clean air, safe communities, no traffic jams, except on Saturday when the farmers came into town to do their shopping. No crime. We didn't lock our doors. People helped people. People knew people. And we were oblivious in Somerset that we were living in a time of segregation. I'm sure our African-American neighbors weren't oblivious, but it was just like a total unawareness of really dealing with that or thinking with that. But it was idyllic in retrospect in so many ways. It had a lot of shortcomings, but it was a great place to spend my early years in.
That's really interesting. Tell us a little bit about your parents and your grandparents and other relatives.
Well, my parents, your grandparents, my dad met my mother in Somerset when he came to stay at what was my grandmother's boarding house, and he went to school in Somerset. In fact, here's a picture of my dad. This was his high school graduation picture. Kind of a sharp-looking dude that he was. And he and my mother, they were both born around 1900, 1901.
Didn't you say he was number 2 in his class?
He was. He was number 2 in his high school graduating class, and he was very proud of that. And I said, Dad, that was a great accomplishment. He said, yeah. He said, there were only 2 of us in the graduating class. And so here's a picture of him with my mother, who died when I was 5, and I remember her in pieces, not a whole lot.
Well, who's that other couple in the picture? There's 2 couples in there.
Yeah, no one knows. I've been asking that question for 40 years, and they're gone. I don't know who they were. Obviously, friends of some kind. But going back to Somerset, I think back on my childhood. We lived at 131 Central Avenue in Somerset. not a very far walk from downtown. And Somerset was at the intersection of then two major roads. Of course, there were no internets, or I mean, interstate highways back then. We just had little two-lane highways. Highway 27 went north and south, all the way, I think, from Maine to Florida. And Highway 80 was an east-west highway, and they intersected in Somerset. So Somerset was a pretty active town, traffic coming through, people headed all over the place. Downtown, there was what was called the Fountain Square, but it was a circle. And that was kind of the center of activity. That's where Tandy's barbershop was located, where I got my haircut. When you got your haircut, he gave you a piece of beech nut chewing gum, I remember. My dad was selling insurance then. His office was off of the Fountain Square upstairs. He and Mr. Dotson shared an office. I can remember going there to see him, and I could smell cigars because Mr. Dotson smoked cigars all the time. And just off the Fountain Square was the Somerset department store where my Aunt Stella worked selling women's clothing. Down the street from that was the Kentucky Theater. And then in the other direction was the Virginia Theater. And that Kentucky Theater was important to me because it cost 15 cents to go as a child. I think it was 35 cents if you're an adult. But I could go for 15 cents. Popcorn was a dime. And so for a quarter, I could go to the movies, which I did many Saturday mornings, seeing cowboy movies like Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, The Lone Ranger, eating popcorn, cheering for the good guys, booing for the bad guys. And when I was really flush and had any money left over, next door there was a bakery where they had these incredible big cream puffs, whipped cream inside a crust. I could taste, I can see them now, for 6 cents. So if you had a nickel, you couldn't get one. If you had 6 cents, you could get the cream puff. Down the street, there were drugstores, other stores where the farmers would come in on Saturday and buy their overalls. And then a street over was the pool room, kind of a shady area. Somerset was what's called a dry county, meaning alcohol was illegal. You couldn't possess it, although somehow it kept showing up. But that's where the bootleggers, a bootlegger was a term for someone who was selling alcohol illegally. And they used to hide it in their boots. I guess that's where they got the term bootlegger. So we knew of alcohol, but it wasn't legal. In fact, that's ironic because all bourbon by law has to be made in Kentucky. If it's not made in Kentucky, that can't be called bourbon. So Jack Daniels coming from Tennessee can't be called bourbon. It's Tennessee drinking whiskey or something, sipping whiskey, whatever they call it. So some of our lives revolved around the Methodist Church, with services Sunday school in the morning, church service at 11. I remember Fanny singing in the choir. And then at night, Sunday service, my dad would make me go. I didn't really like going that much at night, but that's where I learned the old hymns. We sang the hymns that I still love today. And we sang occasionally in the church that I attend here in Florida. So it was a good childhood overall. Summer times, they had recreation programs. We played softball, we had archery, had basketball. A lot of good memories. Our family life, we were big baseball fans, the Cincinnati Reds. And we listened to the games on the radio. And then in basketball season, it was UK, University of Kentucky basketball. Big rivals with Tennessee. I remember my brother Joe brought a date home, the woman he was seeing, I guess he was at college, and she was from Tennessee. And I remember thinking, oh, how could he be with a girl from Tennessee? I mean, that was the rivalries that were underway in those days. It was a lot of fun.
That's really all very interesting. And tell me a little bit more about my great-grandmother. I know you've talked a little bit about her, but your grandmother, tell us what you know about her.
Well, I lived there off and on. I lived there after my mother died, but I was not eligible. I wasn't old enough for school. I was 5, I think. I turned 5 in November. She died. I lived with her until the school year, or until the next summer. So she died, I think, in December. So I lived there till June, and then Fanny and David were out of school, and I went back to Central Avenue. She was a great lady. She'd been married 4 times. Her last husband was Mr. Simpson. My mother's father was named Hall, and I don't know the names of the other 2. She had Cherokee blood in it. I guess it was her great grandmother was known as Cherokee Annie, thanks to some research that was done by Dick Beckett, who did a great job. And I came across a recent picture of the 2 of us. I guess I was this picture's not dated. I think I was about 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
That's me and Grandma on her couch in the living room.
So was she the one that ran a boarding house?
Oh, she did. I never saw it. It was closed by the time I was old enough to know what was going on. There were real shortage of hotels in those days, and very few restaurants actually. But she had a restaurant, boarding house, and there's a picture I've seen over the years of a long table with an African-American cook whose name I knew at one time down at the end of the table, and all the food piled up and hungry-looking men seated around the table. It was a well-known boarding house, I guess, but it had closed by the time I grew up. But I stayed with Grandma a lot. She was really, she was a great lady. She had an incredible life. There's no question about that.
So you stayed with her when you were 5. Did you not have to go to kindergarten?
We didn't have kindergarten. If you had the money for private kindergarten, in fact, one of my cousins ran a private kindergarten, but I didn't go. We didn't have the money, so I didn't attend. So school started in the 1st grade. And I remember the 1st grade very well. My teacher was Mrs. Porch. And I still remember being troubled because Mrs. Porch said, I want all my students to have this writing tablet, and the tablet, it was either Big Chief or Red Chief. I can still see it in my head. It had a red cover on it with an Indian head on it. And she wanted everyone to have the same tablet, but I didn't have the money. I remember my dad said, oh, no, that cost too much. I don't know, it was maybe $10. I don't know what it was. Money was tight. We went up and down with the economy, and more, I guess, more down than up. But I remember she didn't like it that I didn't have it. But, 1st grade, what can I do? 2nd grade, I had Mrs. Christopher, and her husband taught chemistry. I remember Fanny talking about Mr. Christopher, and I knew their son Ronnie because we went to the First Methodist Church together. 3rd grade was Mrs. Glover, who was related to me through my mother. She was Aunt Anna's daughter, I guess. And Anna lived with Aunt Lucy, Aunt Lucy was my grandmother's sister. So I'm not sure all those connections. I'd have to chart them out. In the 4th grade was Clodagh Ashford. She was an old maid. We used to call women never married old maid. That's probably not politically correct these days, but that's what we call her then. She lived with her mother, Aunt Lucy. And interesting, I've got a couple of strong memories of her. One was we were at church one night, my dad and I ran into her. And I remember her saying, well, Charlie's in my class. He's always raising his hand. He wants to be first. He wants to answer the questions first. For some reason that stuck with me. I'm not sure I ever changed all that much. And secondly, I remember once being in class, it was right after Easter, apparently. And she was going around asking all the kids to say, well, what did you get for Easter? What did you get for Easter? And I remember telling the truth. I didn't get anything for Easter. Nothing, I said. And she said, well, you and I are just alike. She said, I didn't get anything for Easter either. So obviously being empathetic and I guess trying to keep me from feeling bad. I don't think I felt bad because I didn't know you were supposed to get things for Easter. So, in fact, that reminded me of another story. I remember once, I don't know who the people were, but someone, I could see them now. They drove up at our house. I'm not sure how old I was, 6, I guess, or 7. And I went out to see them at the car, and I remember telling them, yeah, today's my birthday. And they said, oh, what'd you get for your birthday? And I didn't get anything for my birthday. And so they drove away, and I didn't feel bad about it. It's just a matter of fact. And I remember them coming back, and they brought me a cap gun or something. They went to give me a birthday present. That was sweet. You know, they weren't family members. I don't remember who they were, but I remember saying, "Oh, thank you." I took it. I was happy to give it. I mean, part of the interesting thing looking back on it, by any stretch of the imagination, we were poor, but I didn't know we were poor. And in retrospect, we were poor in ways like virtually no dental care, um, probably pretty shabby clothes. You could argue about the food. I don't remember any. I mean, never went hungry. I do remember electricity being turned off. And what I remember about that was the guy that turned it off um, saying to Fanny, "I'm very sorry, Fanny." He knew Fanny because Fanny was good friends with his daughter. But he said, "I have to do this." And I don't remember, but I don't think it was all very long. My dad came, probably borrowed some money somewhere, but it came back on. At least we had electricity. You know, not everyone did back then.
So let me follow up on that, because I have some questions about what it was like in school with regards to that. You know, these days you hear about so many kids that where the families don't have much money and they're getting fed at school for lunch. Do you remember, was there a cafeteria, or did you bring your lunch, or were you getting fed at school, or how did that all work?
I don't know. I was trying to think of that because I remember later on in Burnside, I remember having lunch there, but I don't remember anybody paying. I have a feeling lunch was just provided. I know I didn't take a lunch from home. There was no one to prepare me a lunch. I didn't have a good prepared lunch until many years later when Evelyn, Joe's, my sister-in-law, Evelyn fixed me lunches when I had to stay with him for a while. But I was trying to remember that the other day, and I honestly don't remember.
But wait, did you say you went to school in Burnside? I thought you went to school in Somerset, or was
I
it
did
both?
Somerset, but then later on we went to Burnside. When my dad eventually got remarried, and we relocated to Burnside. But I won't go into that yet. I'm still in
Right.
the Somerset frame of mind. But I don't remember how we handled lunch. I don't remember it being a big issue. I do remember vividly around the third grade, learning to read enough. I remember coming home, and there was no one at home because my dad was working, we didn't have a mother. David and Fanny were doing other things. So today I would have been called a latchkey kid, but we didn't have any locks on our door, so I didn't have a key. But I remember coming home and reading about pilgrims, and then reading about pioneers building log cabins in Kentucky and having to fight off the Indians, and thinking, "Wow, this is fabulous." Remember the excitement of learning to read. It was just like open things up. I thought, this is great. I could read these stories all to myself. In addition to listening to the radio, where they had stories of Sergeant Preston, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, brought to you by Nabisco, Nabisco. Nabisco is the name to know. For a breakfast, you can't beat eating Nabisco shredded wheat. I guess it's kind of funny.
You said something that really intrigued me. You said your door, you literally did not have a lock on the door. It was that safe. I can't imagine not locking my door now.
Well, after living in New York for the period that I did, I can't either. But I know I didn't have a key, and if there was a lock, it was not anything that I ever used. So I don't really know the answer to that. But well, of course, a policeman lived next door, which is kind of beside the point. But crime was not anything we worried about. He didn't worry about crime. And the worst thing that ever happened, it was a terrible tragedy, was up the street from us, a pickup truck had a bunch of kids in the back, and somehow it was involved in an accident, and several kids got killed. And I think by then a new hospital had opened, and that was an accident, it wasn't a murder. I'm glad that hospital opened because I do remember in the second grade getting pneumonia and being in that hospital. I remember my brother Joe being there, so he had been in Louisville, so obviously he took a bus, Greyhound bus down to Somerset. And there wasn't a room, and I was in the hallway, and they said, "We've got this medicine for you, and it's called penicillin." And they gave me shots in the butt. And obviously I survived. And I've often thought, you know what, that was Pfizer penicillin, because Pfizer was the first company to make penicillin. Well,
Well,
listen, this is kind of enough for the first episode, I think. What a joy to think about these old times. And when we come back again, I've got some more great pictures of Fanny and David and Joe and others, and we'll talk about moving to Burnside and my dad getting remarried, and I'll give an update on the view on the pandemic from South Florida, say a week or a few days from now.
that sounds really good. And thank you so much, Dad. I forgot to mention in the beginning of this video that today is Saturday, April the 4th, 2020, for anyone watching at a future date, if you're wondering where we are in history. Thank you so much for your time. I loved hearing the old stories, and I look forward to our next call.
Thanks for your interest. I love you, son. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dad. Bye-bye.